I'm gonna try and make a video about talking about ADHD. Um, I don't really know where to start, but I know that I have a lot of accumulated talking points, and I'm not sure how to even enter into all that sort of area. YouTube, um, YouTube uh, suggested for my videos that are gonna be longer and just talking. I have some table of contents, so let me make some table of contents. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think. Hmm. Do I actually want to do this? Wait. What is ADHD? So, okay. My understanding of ADHD is sort of twofold. So there's the energy explanation. So one, energy, and two, relations. So the energy explanation is that you lack energy, that your baseline for energy is very low. And it's different from somebody with depression who feels that their life isn't so great and all of that, right? The a, a person with ADHD is not in this sort of disappointed state, but rather they don't have the sort of meanings about life that would make them feel energy, right? Like I think I actually don't know much about depression, and I think ADHD people probably experience a little bit of it more. But I shouldn't really talk about depression. The the thing about the ADHD is that people, my guess is that people don't really care about you. And as a result, the meanings that certain things should take don't really have any drive to them, don't really give you any real motivation, right? And I think, in a way that meanings are also killed, right? That the things that might have meaning are like dead. And and so you also have this sort of contrast between having a very low energy and being excitable, which has a lot of is a very high energy state, right? And that can be explained by the fact that when you have very low energy, you can feel as though something that activates you is very valuable and that you need to chase after that in a very super hopeful state. And I think one of the things maybe I'll do in this video is just try and resolve my confusions about what is ADHD. I mean, I have a little bit of personal theory, but hopefully by the end of the video, things actually start to come together a little bit more. So, The second theory is about an extension. So it's sort of in the common vernacular, I guess you would say, uh, to think about being loved as a child as an extension of one parent's love for the other. And so maybe the parent doesn't particularly love the child, but it's as if they love the child because they love the parent, right? They there's some confusion there, some a little bit of an extension that needs to be traced back, and it can be cause a lot of confusion, blindness. You know, love becomes this sort of oddly conditional thing that ought to be earned or something like that. But with ADHD, my understanding is that it's actually kind of the opposite. That one parent either hates or simply doesn't care about the child as a result of hating or simply not caring about the parent, right? And as a result, there's sort of this meaning, this whole of meaning, you know, that things that should take on meaning lose meaning because of the fact that independent of the person with the ADHD, you know, related to the other parent and not oneself, um, the meanings are sort of wiped away, pushed down, oppressed, humiliated, so on. And it's not necessarily a big trauma response, right? I mean, it is a trauma, but it's not necessarily, you were beaten with a whip or something, right? It's more about a general trend of feeling. And so as a result, you have a very low baseline of energy. And that's kind of, I guess, the first talking point. So I'm going to put a space, check mark. Um, Failures and successes of ADHD. Okay, so to my mind, um, ADHD is actually a kind of a superpower, and that is because you learn a lot about energy as a way to cope with your ADHD, right? Which is different from saying you cope with the relations, right? You actually, on two levels, actually, there's a superpower to ADHD. The first is in coping. Oh, so I guess you could call the energy side of what is ADHD the disease. The, oh, shit. The symptoms and the relations. Oh, the disease. Yeah. And so coping with, oh, wait. So when it comes to both of these, um, let's start here. Like coping with the symptoms, the successes are that you are very energy conscientious, meaning not just energy conscientious the way it's usually used about global energy and stuff, but that you are energy conscious about your own mind, right? It's very um, it's almost a protective mechanism against um, like bad stuff, right? If you don't have very much energy, things that are fake, right? Fake energy stuff are almost repulsive, right? A lot of people get mixed up with a bunch of nonsense ventures because they have a lot of energy and they even have too much energy and they need to expel that, and it's not that way at all with ADHD, right? People with ADHD cannot commit a huge amount of time and energy and attention into complete nonsense, right? They can definitely have a few thoughts here and there about doing that, but the real follow through, it's never going to happen, right? And so, on the one hand, you fake stuff you keep very far away from yourself just to save energy, because in the end, that kind of stuff will always lose you energy. And so, being very energy conscientious makes it so that you're focused on the right stuff and you can kind of keep away the wrong stuff. Um, on the other hand, right, the failure of this is you might not have the energy to actually keep away the fake stuff, right? Bad relationships, bad habits, right? It takes energy to actually change things, and sometimes you literally don't have the energy, even if it would be better for you to, um, better in the long term to have that, right? So it's rather important to always have as high a baseline of energy with ADHD as you can, and getting lots of rest and not expending yourself in bad ways, so that when things do start to go wrong, you have enough energy to fix that. But that can feel like a big burden, I guess. Um, being coping with the symptoms, another success is that you also know a lot about energy, or at least you feel it, right? I'm not sure you can really explain it too well, but you just have a natural sort of mechanism inside yourself to regulate the energy in a highly efficient way. And that takes knowing about the energy, knowing about the way things are working, and all that kind of knowledge is rather important knowledge when it comes to anything you do, right? When you do things for other people, keeping in mind, how that affects their energy is so important, it's so true. And oftentimes, other people don't even appreciate this kind of knowledge that you have about energy because they have so much in store, or they are so haphazard about their energy that they just waste it and it doesn't even matter to them. Whereas with you, as someone with ADHD who might want to help them save their energy or something like this, it feels like they don't care. But in the end, when it comes to ADHD, your high efficiency is actually a very good thing. It just sometimes doesn't apply to people who just want to get rid of their energy, spend it as quickly and uselessly as possible. Okay, so I would say that concludes this section. Check mark. Coping with the disease. So the disease itself, the relations, and what I think of when I think of this is about individuality, right? Being separate from the parent who is causing you to not be cared about, or who is the sort of basis for the hatred that's directed at you, right? If you are hated as an extension of the other parent, that means that, sorry, that means that you aren't really seen originally, right? The things you need to do are actually rather distinctive, right? The um, the relations, the disease create can be kind of momentarily cured by feeling distinctive, like you stand out, like when somebody comes up to you and they form a relationship to you in a total vacuum, you know, that is sort of the dream of in any relationship, is that somebody relates to you as if they have never related to somebody else before in their life, right? And obviously, this is going to make you more creative, but not in a very meaningful sense, I think. Trying to be distinctive for distinctive sense is sort of like trying to put put aside the problem, right? Momentarily put aside the problem, and it's not a very deep creativity either. That's not really where the creativity comes from when people talk about the creativity of ADHD, right? The sort of momentary distinctiveness that you sort of come across is more about your own presentation and a sort of avoidance of the fear. Um, but there is a success with this, right? And the success is again the avoiding the fake stuff. Um, and and what that means is there are a lot of environments that are very hostile to people with ADHD because they make a person feel as though they are completely blended in with the crowd, right? And it so happens that a lot of the time, when people are blended together in a crowd, they are marching for bad stuff, they become Nazis, you know. Anything that makes you feel like you're a part of the crowd feels dangerous. And so, when things are very homogeneous, right? Even something like being of a certain strata in your classroom feels like a threat, right? Being in any sort of crowded situation where people are constantly trying to organize as a unifying identity, that feels threatening. And that can be very good because a lot of the times when people are just in a crowded sort of mind, they aren't thinking, they are, just trying to heighten this sense of unification and with no real sense for the future, you know? And so, avoiding the bad stuff is pretty much the main success of this. But it's worth mentioning also that, like, being optimal is something that an ADHD person probably can't really do, right? Being, how do you say this? Being you know, when it comes to optimization, even the most optimized person, or especially the most optimized person, isn't very creative. And what that means is they are following the plan that leads to the optimal results. That's what it means to be optimal. And to have this fear of being associated with a plan, with something beyond oneself, is threatening. And so, even something like being optimal is sort of dangerous for a person with ADHD, or feels that way. Of course, in the end, it's actually not that scary. Um, but there is this kind of hole of meaning, no matter what, this vacuum that gnaws away at anything that might feel like you're being blurry, feel like you're an extension of something else. Okay, so I think we covered that pretty nicely. Okay, um, what do I have left? Hmm, let's actually call it there, huh? Cool, cool. Okay, thanks for listening. Hopefully I wasn't wrong about too much.